where she is entertaining other people in the bedroom. He enjoyed having the freak offs.
She's being asked specifically about the drug use.
She is clearly excited about a freak off.
The courtroom fell completely silent when Cassie described being violently raped by Diddy after refusing to participate in one of his infamous freak-offs. That silence was shattered moments later when Diddy suddenly jumped up from his seat, his face twisted with rage. Witnesses say the judge had to threaten to remove him from court as security tensed up, ready to intervene. Day 4 of this trial has become the turning point that nobody expected, and we've got the exclusive details on exactly what Cassie said that pushed him over the edge.
I think the defense naturally is trying to poke holes sort of in some of the earlier testimony that Sean Combs was always the person in control and that Cassie Ventura was forced into these situations. So the defense all day have really been laying out a lot of text messages and a lot of emails that tell the story of a very complicated relationship from the very beginning. In fact, in 2007, they showed the jurors an email where Ventura basically says after 2 months of having a kiss with Combs and saying that's when their relation started after her 21st birthday. After their relation started 2 months later, jurors saw an email where she basically says, I love you. I'm so excited to be a part of this relationship with you. How she had plans of a future with him. So they're laying out somebody that was excited about the idea of being with Sean Combs at 21 years old and her future plans, but also a little bit of jealousy. In that same email, she makes reference to wondering if maybe Combs should have went after her friend, Carrie, and then said maybe you should have went with Carrie because she could help you or, you know, do the things that you want her to do or something to that effect. But she also said, which I thought was really interesting in that email, Rachel, is I want to be the woman that you want me to be. Like almost this idea of teach me what it is I need to be to keep you happy. And that was 2 months into the relationship.
About how she had to go to rehab. And one really important note as we ended yesterday, Nicole, was this really sad moment that she talked about how even after she left Sean Combs, even after their relationship ended, and she was with her husband and had 2 babies, she's on her 3rd right now, 9 months pregnant, she said that she felt suicidal thinking about the life that she had with Sean Combs, and even asked her husband at one point saying, you've got this, right? If something were to happen to me, you would be able to take care of these children. And said she tried to and wanted to walk out into traffic and that her husband had to stop her. That is the long-standing PST that she has had from this relationship.
What does a man worth $900 million do when his darkest secrets are exposed in court? For Diddy, he completely lost control. The moment happened faster than anyone expected. The courtroom was packed on day 4. Reporters filled every available seat, phones ready to break news the second it happened. Legal teams shuffled papers nervously. Everyone knew Cassie was scheduled to give the most damaging testimony yet, but nobody predicted how Diddy would react. I spoke with 3 people who were sitting just feet away when it happened. They all described the same thing. Diddy's face literally transformed in seconds. One minute he looked calm, almost bored, said one witness who works for the court. The next minute, his eyes went wild and his whole body tensed up like he was about to attack someone. People watched as Diddy's fists clenched so tight his knuckles turned white. His breathing changed. He started rocking slightly in his chair. The security team noticed too. They shifted positions, moving closer to the defense table, ready for whatever might happen next. Then it happened. As Cassie described a particularly graphic detail about what Diddy allegedly forced her to do, he suddenly jumped up from his seat. His chair flew backward, crashing into the railing behind him with a sound that made everyone in the room jump. But the noise wasn't what shocked everyone. It was what came out of his mouth. "That's a lie," he shouted, pointing at Cassie. "You know that's a damn lie." His voice echoed through the courtroom as his lawyers grabbed his arms, trying to pull him back down. The judge immediately stopped proceedings. He slammed his gavel 3 times while court officers moved in. "Order! Order in my court!" But Diddy wasn't done. He tried to shake off his lawyers, who were now physically restraining him, whispering urgently in his ear. One was heard saying, "Sean, stop it. This is exactly what they want." The judge looked directly at Diddy and warned in a voice that silenced the entire room. "Mr. Combs, control yourself, or you will be removed from my courtroom immediately. This is your only warning." For a moment, it seemed like Diddy might actually get dragged out in handcuffs. His body was still tense, his breathing heavy. But slowly, his lawyers managed to get him back in his seat. This wasn't just some small outburst. People who've known Diddy for decades were shocked. One music executive who's worked with him for years told me after court, "I've seen him angry before, but never like this. He looked unhinged, like he'd completely lost control of himself." Another witness described how Diddy's expensive suit was suddenly drenched in sweat after the outburst. His designer tie was crooked. His face was shiny with sweat. It was like watching someone have a breakdown in real time. The judge called for a 15-minute recess after the incident, but the damage was done. Jurors watched the whole thing. Court reporters furiously took notes, and Cassie, who had paused her testimony during the chaos, remained perfectly still, her face showing no reaction at all. When court resumed, Diddy was quiet. But everyone in that room had just witnessed something they'll never forget. The moment a powerful man realized he might finally face consequences for his actions.
Her voice is low at times. The defense did tell her if it's too much, I can read them, but there were many times early on this morning where she read some of those explicit details where she is clearly excited about a freak off and talks about entertaining other people in the bedroom.
And what has Diddy's demeanor been in this cross-examination as well?
There was a moment where Sean Combs was nodding in agreement when they brought up a message that he sent her where he said, you know, one of my favorite times of the freak-offs is when we're able to make love after. And then she responds, that's the same for me. Now, what's interesting here is that that does match what she told prosecutors or what she's been telling the jury all along, which is she did this and she said, but she really wanted to spend time with him after the fact. So he was shaking his head at this message where he's almost, I guess, agreeing that he did say, without him saying it, he enjoyed having the freak offs and then having sex with her after the fact. And her saying, I agree with you. I love having sex with you after, too.
Cassie Ventura today looking a little more subdued. She's got her hair pulled back. She's wearing a blazer. And she's being asked right now by the defense. This is the first day of cross-examination. She's being asked specifically about the drug use in the relationship that she had for all those years with Sean Combs. What drugs they took, how much they took, what they felt like when they were on them, what they felt like when they were coming off of them, what the mood was like. Anna Estevado is conducting the cross-examination for Sean Combs' defense, and we did get this clue from the opening statements that the defense really does want to paint her.
So what exactly are these freak-offs that made Diddy lose his cool in court? The term sounds like something from a wild party, but what Cassie described was way darker and more disturbing than anyone expected. When Cassie took the stand, she started talking about what seemed like normal celebrity parties at first. Fancy penthouses in New York, mansion gatherings in Miami, private islands where the rich and famous could let loose away from cameras. But her voice changed when she described how these parties would transform once most guests left. He would make sure I drank heavily all night, Cassie testified, her voice barely audible in the silent courtroom. Then he'd bring in men, paid male sex workers, and order me to have sex with them while he watched everything. The jury leaned forward as Cassie described how Diddy didn't just watch these encounters, he directed them like they were music videos. She said he would give specific instructions about positions and acts, sometimes joining in, other times just filming everything on his phone or with professional camera equipment. These weren't just one-time things, Cassie told the court. They happened at least 30 times over 5 years. She explained that many times she was too drunk or high to properly consent, saying Diddy would often put something in her drinks that made her feel loose and disconnected from what was happening. The most shocking part came when Cassie pulled out printed copies of text messages. In one exchange from 2014, Diddy allegedly wrote, "You better show up tonight or that video from Vegas goes online tomorrow." In another, "Nobody will work with you in this industry if they see what I have on my phone." You could hear a pin drop in the courtroom when Cassie explained how these freak-offs affected her. "I felt worthless afterward, like I wasn't human anymore, just something he owned and could use however he wanted." What really seemed to set Diddy off was when Cassie started naming names. She mentioned specific hotels, dates, and even dropped the names of other celebrities who she claimed knew about these events. Several people in the music industry were allegedly present before some of these freak-offs began, though she clarified that most left before the forced sexual activities started. The most damning testimony came when Cassie described the system Diddy allegedly created. She claimed he would sometimes slip drugs into her drinks without her knowledge, making her more compliant. The male prostitutes were paid extra for their silence, and most importantly, everything was recorded. creating a growing collection of videos that Diddy could hold over her head if she ever tried to leave him or speak out. "These videos were my prison," Cassie testified. "Every time I tried to leave, he would remind me what would happen if those videos got out, how my career would be over, how my family would see them." This wasn't just a wild celebrity lifestyle gone wrong. According to Cassie, these freak-offs were calculated abuse designed to trap her in the relationship, a way to create leverage, to ensure her silence, to break her down so completely that she couldn't imagine life without him. And based on Diddy's reaction in court, hearing these secrets exposed to the world was something he never thought would happen.
You know, they have their notebooks in their hand. They're coming in, they're very alert, and I think this is one of those testimonies where you have no choice but to pay attention and almost be flabbergasted, obviously, at some of what you're hearing, because it's not only just insight into somebody's sex life, but the details are disturbing at times, especially during that prosecution testimony when we saw some of the alleged abuse, or we saw pictures of her after a beating of some kind, according to her. But the jurors are definitely paying attention. I don't see anyone that's not keeping their focus on Cassie Ventura, and also I noticed them taking notes a lot of times.
And the children, as they were exiting court yesterday, two of the girls were seen crying. How emotional have they been in court?
Again, I cannot imagine if that was my father or somebody close to me up there and having to hear details of their sex life. Those are young women. They lost their mother, one of them, the twins. So no one can probably quite understand what it is that they're going through, but I think that's something that you think about on both sides, you know, to look at Alex Fine, which is Cassie Ventura's husband, and think about him having to listen to all that's being said about the type of woman that Cassie Ventura was versus the person that's expecting, you know, their third child together now. So whether it's Combs's family or Ventura's family that's there to support her, her brother and her husband, Alex Fine, I think it's difficult on both sides. I've seen him taking notes from the beginning. I see him put his glasses on. He gets very close to the screen when they're reading some of those text messages. So he's paying attention.
Now, Ventura confirmed that she and Combs had conversations about a swingers lifestyle, but that the freak-offs, they were very different.
Yeah, so she talked about this idea where I guess Combs wanted her to watch him have sex with another woman. She said that happened 2 or 3 times, but that he mentioned it frequently.
Kim Porter came up today in testimony. What was the significance there?
The defense said early on that this case would be about infidelity, love, and jealousy. And this is where they brought that up today when they brought up Kim Porter's name. The defense asked Cassie Ventura, "Are you jealous, or were you jealous of Kim Porter?" And Ventura sort of contemplated, but did get to this moment where she said, knowing that Combs spent holidays with his family, which meant with Porter, did bother her. And she admitted that. They also pointed out that there was testimony where she talked about being insanely jealous overall as a girlfriend. So, yeah.
We're hearing the judge wants Cassie off the stand tomorrow. Will the prosecution and the defense get equal time?
Yeah, as long as there aren't any additional motions, I think that is the goal, to have her off the stand by tomorrow.
Why do you think that? What's the reasoning behind wanting her off the stand tomorrow?
In the very beginning, Rachel, they told us that she would likely be on that stand 2 to 3 days. So here we are.
What made even seasoned courtroom reporters look away during Cassie's testimony? It was what came next. After explaining those freak-offs to the court, Cassie started talking about what happened when she finally said no. The courtroom atmosphere changed instantly. Cassie's lawyer handed her a tissue as she took a deep breath before continuing. She looked directly at the jury instead of at Diddy when she began describing a night in March 2018. "We were in Miami for a music event," she testified. "He had set up another one of these sessions with 2 men I'd never seen before. I was sober that night because I had an early morning interview the next day." Cassie explained that when she refused to participate, Diddy initially laughed like he thought she was joking. When he realized she was serious, his whole demeanor changed. "He called me ungrateful, said after everything he did for my career, this was the least I could do." Her voice started shaking as she described leaving the party and going back to her hotel room alone. That's when things got truly disturbing. Cassie testified that around 3 a.m. she heard pounding on her hotel room door. It was Diddy, clearly drunk and furious. A security camera image from the hotel hallway was shown to the court, confirming his presence outside her room at 3:17 a.m. "I opened the door to tell him to leave, and he pushed his way in," she said. Cassie then described in graphic detail how Diddy allegedly threw her onto the bed, ripped her clothes, and sexually assaulted her while she repeatedly begged him to stop. I kept saying, "Please stop, you're hurting me," but he told me to shut up. He said this was what I deserved for embarrassing him in front of those people. 2 jurors visibly flinched during this testimony. Another juror, an older woman, removed her glasses and wiped her eyes. Court reporters who've covered dozens of criminal cases looked down at their notepads instead of at Cassie as she continued. What happened next shocked the courtroom. Cassie's lawyer presented medical records from an urgent care clinic in Miami dated March 9, 2018, the morning after the alleged assault. The records documented bruising on her wrists, thighs, and neck, along with other injuries consistent with sexual assault. Photos of these injuries were shown to the jury, but not displayed publicly in the courtroom. One male juror asked for a short break after viewing them, which the judge granted. "I told the doctor I fell during a dance rehearsal," Cassie testified. "I was too ashamed and scared to tell the truth. I knew no one would believe me over him." She explained that she hid the injuries from friends and family with makeup and long-sleeved clothing. A former assistant later testified that she helped Cassie cover bruises multiple times throughout their relationship. What makes Cassie's allegations impossible to dismiss is the paper trail she brought with her. Text messages to friends, where she hinted at the abuse without fully explaining it. Medical records documenting injuries. Hotel security footage. It wasn't just her word against his anymore. When asked why she didn't report the assault to police, Cassie's answer was simple and devastating. "He told me if I ever tried to report him, he would release those videos from the freak-offs and destroy my life completely. I believed him."
She says she was forced to participate in, of course, those freak-offs. The defense began establishing the love that Combs and Cassie had at the beginning of their relationship, how things really started, then escalated. They showed an exhibit of email exchanges that included messages from Combs that read, quote, "It makes me so happy that you would fly from Atlanta for me." And then Cassie replying, "I am a very lucky woman. I would fly wherever you needed me." And other exchanges that said, "Going to sleep now so it can be tomorrow faster." And then Combs replying, "I love my baby." Cassie saying on the stand that she got to see a private version of Combs that the public and even his own family didn't see, revealing she believed that Combs truly loved her. The defense also trying to establish there was nothing coercive about these freak-offs between the two that she has been describing for jurors these last few days. They've repeatedly described that Combs' sexual preferences as part of a swingers lifestyle, and that Cassie seemed eager, in fact, to participate in these freak-offs. Like another message that read, "I'm always ready to freak off." That's a quote. And another one that said, "When we used to freak off, when we were so in love, there was no question asked. It just felt right." And when asked why she agreed to the freak-off, she said, "I just wanted to make him happy." Cassie testifying that she would help get supplies for the freak-offs. She would call the drugs that she took vitamins. All of this to show she had an agency in these sexual activities.
Who was watching when one of music's most powerful men completely lost control in public? Pretty much everyone who matters in this case. The courtroom wasn't just packed, it was filled with people whose opinions actually count. In the front row sat Cassie's parents and younger sister. I heard from someone who watched them throughout the testimony that their faces told the whole story. When Cassie described the abuse, her mother kept her eyes closed, gripping her husband's hand so tight her knuckles went white. But when Diddy erupted, something changed in their expressions. It wasn't happiness, more like confirmation, like they were finally seeing what they had imagined happening behind closed doors for years. You wouldn't believe who showed up to support Diddy. 3 major music executives from his past sat directly behind his defense team. These weren't just random industry people. These were heavy hitters who've worked with him for decades. When he exploded in court, their reactions told you everything. One immediately started texting someone, another stared straight ahead, pretending nothing was happening. The third one actually put his hand over his face. After court, all 3 rushed out a side door to avoid reporters. What most people don't know is that security in the courtroom had already been beefed up before this incident. A bailiff told me they added 2 additional officers that morning because Diddy had been showing signs of increasing agitation throughout the trial. His leg would shake under the table. He'd whisper angrily to his lawyers. "Little things that made us pay attention," the bailiff said. They were watching him closely even before he snapped. The jury saw everything. One juror, a middle-aged woman with short gray hair, wrote so furiously in her notebook during Diddy's outburst that she broke her pencil tip. A legal expert I spoke with said this kind of behavior in front of a jury is basically a nightmare for any defense team. Jurors are watching his behavior as evidence. When someone explodes like that, it makes the accusations against them seem more believable. The press section was completely full. Reporters from TMZ, Billboard, Rolling Stone, and every major network witnessed the whole thing. One veteran entertainment reporter told me afterward, "I've covered celebrity trials for 15 years. This was the moment his carefully crafted image completely fell apart. You can't unsee something like that." Even the judge's clerk, who's seen it all, looked shocked. The court stenographer kept typing through the whole outburst, capturing every word Diddy shouted for the official record. This wasn't some private moment caught on a hidden camera. This was Diddy losing control in front of the exact people who matter most. The judge who will instruct the jury, the jurors who will decide his fate, the reporters who will tell the world what happened, the executives who've supported his career, and Cassie's family who've waited years for this moment. As one courtroom observer put it to me after we left, "For a man who spent decades controlling his image down to the smallest detail, this was his worst nightmare come true. He showed exactly who he is to the people who will decide what happens to him next."
You know, it's the man has no class. He has no kindness in his dark, dark heart. And he's depraved. That's my opinion. This is a depraved, disgusting individual about whom I wish to hear nothing after this trial is done. The question is he a criminal? You know, is he basically akin to a mob boss running several criminal enterprises? And while it's very clear to me he is a depraved, disgusting person, we have to prove that he violated the law. I actually think it's going to be pretty easy, but I can see what the defense is doing here, trying to say, all right, he has these, quote, freak-offs, you know, weird, kinky group sex in Hollywood. That's not an illegal thing. It happens all the time.
Cassie Ventura, where she revealed that after the relationship had ended with Sean Combs, there was an incident where he raped her. She talked about how later on she had PTSD flashbacks of her experience with him of the freak-offs. And at one point she came home and told her husband while their kids were sleeping that she just couldn't take it anymore and thought about walking into traffic.
If you don't have the consent of the women or the men, as the case may be, it is illegal. But okay, we're going to argue over whether they were willing participants. It's almost like a Harvey Weinstein situation where he's going to say they willingly took drugs.
Another thing we learned about yesterday was her drug addiction. She said that she had an addiction to opiates, Errol.
They're going to say, absolutely not. He drugged me against my will. Maybe there were drugs in that baby oil, maybe in another way, but I definitely didn't consent to being drugged or to being raped or sodomized by P. Diddy.
And singer Dawn Richard from the girl group Danity Kane, she is likely on the famous people list because she's one of Diddy's many accusers.
Yeah.
Not in his criminal case, but she sued him civilly last year, claiming that she saw him abuse Cassie, his girlfriend, and that she herself was sexually assaulted, deprived of food, and cheated out of money that she was owed. Guess what? You're going to hear from her attorney in just a hot minute. But first, I want to bring in News Nation correspondent Caitlin Becker, who's outside the federal courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Caitlin's been covering this case gavel to gavel. Okay, first of all, let's just start with the drip, drip, drip of all the names, because the internet is really on fire. What happened today?
You know, Ashley, a lot of the same things. You get asked these same exact questions about these celebrities with no real context as to why. And you really hit the nail on the head a minute ago when you said jury selection's kind of boring, but not in the Diddy case. Most prospective jurors who come into jury selection have never heard of the defendant, let alone have an opinion of them. But what we heard today was prospective jurors who were excluded because they flat out said they don't like Diddy going into it. They don't have a favorable opinion. One guy said he believed Diddy has enough money to buy his way out of jail. So those jurors immediately excluded. There was also some laughs in the courtroom today from the attorneys and the judge when one prospective juror said that he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to smoke marijuana for all 8 to 10 weeks of the trial. So that person was excluded. But by the end of the day, they've added 10 more people to that pool of 45 that they're trying to get.
What specific testimony made Diddy finally crack after days of maintaining maintaining his composure. It wasn't just about what Cassie said. It was about what she played in court. For 3 full days, Diddy sat there like nothing bothered him. Even when former employees testified about witnessing abuse, even when financial records showed he paid off hotel staff to keep quiet about damaged rooms, even when Cassie's therapist read notes from sessions dating back to 2016. Through all of it, Diddy kept that same calm expression, sometimes even smiling slightly when his lawyers made a good point. But on day 4, everything changed. Court transcripts show the exact moment when Cassie's testimony broke through his carefully controlled mask. It happened at 2:17 p.m. when Cassie started talking about a phone call she received from Diddy after she first threatened to leave him. "He called me late at night around 3 a.m., Cassie testified. He was angry, talking fast. He said if I ever told anyone about the freak-offs or what he did to me in Miami, he would make sure my family suffered." The courtroom got super tense when Cassie's lawyer stood up and said, "Your Honor, we'd like to play Exhibit 47. Nobody knew what was coming. Diddy's lawyers immediately objected, but they were overruled when the judge learned this evidence had been properly submitted during discovery. That's when it happened. Cassie's legal team had secretly held back their biggest piece of evidence until this perfect moment. They played a recorded phone call that Cassie had somehow managed to capture back in 2018. The audio quality wasn't perfect, but everyone in that courtroom could clearly hear Diddy's voice. "You think anybody's gonna believe you? I run this industry. Who do you think people will side with, me or you? I'll make sure you never work again. And your mom's nursing job, your sister's college scholarship, gone. I know people everywhere." As the recording played, witnesses described how Diddy's face completely transformed. His eyes widened, his jaw clenched. He turned to his lawyer and whispered something urgent. His lawyer looked shocked too. This recording had blindsided their entire defense strategy. After the recording finished playing, Cassie looked directly at Diddy for the first time and said these exact words. "He told me nobody would believe me because he owned the music industry and would destroy my life." That's when Diddy couldn't take it anymore. That's when he jumped up shouting that it was a lie. But the recording made it impossible to deny. It wasn't just her word against his anymore. It was his own voice confirming exactly what she'd been saying all along. A legal expert watching the trial told me later, "That recording changed everything. His defense was built around claiming she was making up stories for money. But you can't argue with your own voice threatening someone." The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Everyone in that courtroom heard Diddy's threats. They heard how he believed his power and money would protect him forever. They heard the real voice behind the carefully managed public image. And most importantly, they saw what happened when a man who thought he was untouchable realized that even he might have to face consequences for his actions. What started as just another day in court has transformed into what could be the final nail in Diddy's career coffin. The man who once seemed untouchable is now watching his empire crumble in real time. Legal experts I've spoken with say Cassie's testimony, combined with that shocking audio recording and Diddy's courtroom meltdown, has completely changed the trajectory of this case. They're now predicting not just a massive financial settlement, but potential criminal charges too. As one courtroom observer whispered to me as we left the building, "We watched a man realize in real time that his money and power might not save him this time."